Good to see you all this morning. I had an uncle. My mom's brother came in town last night. We had dinner with them over at my parents' house, and I excitedly told him about our extreme weather. And in fact, so excited, I pulled up my phone app and showed him the big red box that said extreme weather warning, freezing temperatures. And I was really impressed by that. He was not. He said he just came from 0-degree weather. So I guess it's all relative. But I told him, don't take this away from us, right? Like this is exciting. I mean, we get to wear our jackets and not feel silly for wearing our jackets. So that's a pretty big deal. But it's good to see you all this morning. Thank you for braving the cold, the extreme weather warning to be here this morning. It's good to see you all. Thank Derek for the song leading, and particularly for leading that hymn we just sang, Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah, not only because I like the hymn, but because in some ways it serves as a little bit of an inspiration for the lesson this morning. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. This idea of God guiding us, of leading us, we have lots of hymns like that. He leadeth me, so on and so forth. Lots of Anywhere with Jesus, all these songs that talk about God leading us and holding us, his unchanging hand, all these things guiding us through life. And it's this kind of vivid imagery, isn't it, of this walking, this pilgrimage, and God there leading us along the way. And I've thought about that a lot recently. This path of our lives, this journey that we're on, that there is a plan and we're guided and we're going towards something. And of course, we understand all that ultimately to think in terms of the big picture of salvation, of heaven, of this destination that we're all journeying towards. And God is the great Jehovah who is leading us on our way. As we think about that biblically, I think some of the common sort of illustrations that come to our minds, and maybe the most common of Jehovah guiding us, is of Abraham, who left Ur of the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan. And even back in Genesis chapter 11, it says, first of all, in verse 31, that Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldees, the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. So this journey began with his father, and they didn't quite make it. And that's probably a pretty good lesson in there, too, about this not making it all the way there, settling halfway, something like that. But what's more interesting to me this morning is the way that the story continues, that from there the Lord comes in chapter 12 and says to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And so Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. And when they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. And at that time the Canaanites were in the land, and the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord, who appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on, still going toward the Negev. And of course, he goes on all the way down to Egypt and all those things. But there's so many things about the way that this is written, the section of Abraham, that I think is interesting. He gathers up everything he has at 75. And of course, Abraham lived longer than most of us will live. But it isn't like he lived as long as Methuselah. I mean, he was an old man at 75, even then, right? When others are retiring or packing it in and have gathered their things together and are ready to settle down and live out the rest of their days in ease, he gathers everything and journeys across the world. Takes them all with him. It's pretty incredible that he does that. But then when he gets there, he pitched his tent. He didn't build a house. He didn't establish a palace. He didn't cut down trees. He didn't build a log cabin. Even Jeremiah Johnson built a log cabin in the mountains. But not Abraham. He pitched a tent. And then he the section we stopped, I kind of stopped there on purpose because he journeyed on, which becomes representative of his entire life, isn't it? That he moved from here to there and back again and all around in his tent, wandering, journeying. And what's fascinating about that is that it provides this picture, an analogy of the guidance of God, right? God led him. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. He showed him. And although the hymn, I think, specifically references the fiery pillar, in the Exodus kind of journeying, I always think of this kind of story, Abraham maybe first. This way that it speaks to us. Because Abraham didn't see the miracles of the Exodus, right? He didn't see the 10 plagues. He didn't have God speaking to him in a burning bush the way that Moses did. And not to belittle the fact that God spoke to him or anything like that, but he journeyed, he went with relatively little compared to crossing the Red Sea on dry ground, for instance, or something like that. And as the Hebrew writer says, he's looking for a better country. He has this hope. He's journeying. He sees something hopeful on the end of the story. But whether you take this one or the story of the Exodus, I think there's something about the search and the travel that we can relate to, right? The journeying, the figuring out where we're going, trying to understand it, trying to have this place in front of us. And specifically, we don't know the direction that our lives are headed. We don't know what kind of jobs we're going to have. We don't know what the future holds in our personal lives, our professional lives, in retirement. We don't know when the weather's coming or when it's going, right? Like we don't have a lot of stability in terms of these things. We don't know a lot of things, just like Abraham. And yet we're called to journey, take a trip, to pilgrimage. Abraham didn't see the miracles of the Exodus. He didn't watch the plagues fall, the seas split. He didn't eat manna that appeared in the morning or drink water from a struck rock. And yet, Scripture tells us that Abraham was guided just as surely. God may not have been in front of him in a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day, but God was with him. Hebrews 11, verse 8 says, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was going to receive as inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promises in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with them of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has no foundation, that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. His life was movement. His life was not aimless movement, though. He lived in tents not because he loved instability, but because he believed in something more permanent to come. Foundations of a city that were going to exist. Hebrew writer goes on to say a few verses later that all these died in faith, not having received the things they promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. Something beyond, forward-looking, not constantly thinking about what they left and what was behind them, which again was the problem of the Exodus wanderings, right? They kept thinking back to Egypt as opposed to looking forward to the thing that was in front of them. And I think that phrase matters, a better country, a belief in something better to come. Abraham was wandering because God had given him a destination worth walking towards. Something in front of him that was worth seeking after. But I think this is also where we start to misunderstand sometimes the guidance that God gives. Because it's easy to think of God's guidance in terms of navigation, right? And for Abraham, maybe it was in some ways to go from Ur of the Chaldees to Canaan. Maybe there's some navigation there. And that's the way we want to think about it. What job should we take? What decisions should we make? What door do we walk through as they're presented for us in our lives? But I think Scripture consistently frames guidance more in terms of formation rather than navigation. For instance, in Deuteronomy chapter 8, Moses is speaking to the people. This is after they've wandered, right? After they've journeyed, they're about to go into Canaan. They're at the verge of the destination, right? And he says to them in verse 2, you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness. Remember the way he led you, right? How did he lead you? What did he teach you? That he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God. The whole idea here is that you would know and understand, that you would grow. Know how he's led you. It isn't about Canaan. It was about the lessons you learned along the way. It was about the testing and the faith that was established. The destination was fixed. And so the wilderness existed to form the people, to teach them. And it's almost as if God is saying, I didn't lead you because you were lost. I led you so you would learn. I'm trying to help you learn who you are and what character you're supposed to have. And the idea is that God isn't just trying to get us somewhere. He's not just trying to navigate us. He's trying to mold us, shape us. And maybe, I don't know, I don't want to put too many words, which the author of that hymn is William Williams. And I looked up the hymn online, and the lyrics are a little bit different, and it said William Williams, and I was like, oh, this can't be the right hymn. Like, that isn't who wrote it. So I had to look up the hymn book and pull it up, and then type in the words to get them right. But sure enough, it says William Williams, so I don't know, interesting. But I don't know what William Williams was thinking in the way that he wrote that, and I don't know if this was his exact thought or not, but maybe there's a reason why the hymn doesn't ask for direction in it. What does he ask for? It asks for bread. It asks for strength. It asks for deliverance and healing waters. It doesn't ask for direction. And maybe it's because the journey itself is doing something to the pilgrim. That the journey matters. And I want to address this, and we'll come to this later in the lesson as well, but we have this assumption of this, we carry this idea that salvation is mainly about ending up in heaven when we die. And of course, heaven is real, heaven is promised, but I don't think that heaven itself is treated as the definition of salvation. It's part of it. Salvation biblically is God healing what has been broken by sin, retraining our loves, reshaping our desires, restoring us to wholeness. And that work begins now. Salvation isn't just heaven, it's something we receive now and transforms us in who we are. And I think that touches back to why the wilderness mattered for Israel, why the tent life mattered for Abraham, why the Christian life, even still, sometimes feels at times unsettled and in motion. It isn't because God isn't telling us where we're going, it's because the road itself is part of the rescue mission. Like the path is part of the change and the salvation that we're receiving. And I think that this connects even to earlier in the book of Hebrews in chapter 4, where we return to the story of Israel, and the story is reframed, not just as some sort of ancient history, but it's kind of a living warning and an invitation to us. It says in Hebrews 4, verse 1, therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us fear lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. For good news came to us just as to them, but the message they heard did not benefit them because they were not united by faith with those who listened. For we who have believed enter that rest. As he said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world. For he has somewhere spoken of the seventh day in this way, and God rested on the seventh day from all his works. And again in this passage he said, they shall not enter my rest. Since therefore it remains for some to enter it, and those who formerly received the good news failed to enter because of disobedience, again he appoints a certain day, today, saying through David so long afterward, and the words already quoted, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day later on. So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. He's using this whole analogy, right? They were going to Canaan, and that was the promise, but they didn't enter the rest. They entered Canaan, but they did not enter the rest. The journey wasn't over. There was something yet to happen. And so the call to us is that rest is still waiting for us. So strive to enter that rest. And there's like a tension to that, right? Like striving for rest. Like, I don't know. I guess I haven't read many of those, but it seems like the opposite of what some sort of self-help book would say, right? You can't grip rest. You can't fight for rest, right? You allow rest to come over you. And yet here the language is strive to enter the rest. But that only sounds strange if rest means inactivity, right? If rest means not doing anything. But I don't think that biblical rest is the absence of effort. Rather, it's the presence of trust. It's the confidence and the assurance of who God is. It's a life ordered around God's purposes rather than our own anxious control. That's the rest that we can begin to receive. That's the peace of God that we can begin to receive as we reshape and reframe our perspective around God and His purposes. Israel didn't fail because the journey was long. They failed because the journey didn't change them the way it was supposed to. By the time they entered Canaan, they were not the faithful people that they were supposed to be, who had learned the lessons that they were supposed to learn from the wilderness. The journey was there to teach them faith and trust in God, that God will feed you every day and He will protect you from your enemies. It wasn't freedom from any sort of pain or anxiety in the way that we typically, traditionally think about those things. It was that God is with you. And when they got into the land, they still didn't believe that God was with them. They didn't learn the lesson of the wilderness. They wanted Egypt's habits. They wanted the luscious land and the wealth and the riches, even the acclaim and power and notoriety that they had. But they wanted it with Canaan's promises. Freedom from slavery without freedom from slavery's mindset. They wanted to remain enslaved to sin, but free from slavery. And it wasn't possible. They didn't learn the lesson of the wilderness the way that they were supposed to. And Hebrews says plainly, that kind of heart doesn't enter the rest, doesn't achieve the salvation they're looking for, which I think brings us back to the hymn again. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. There's a traveling. We're not a tourist, we're a pilgrim. A pilgrim should expect the road to shape them, to change them, to affect them. I want to make this clear as well. Just because the journey is pivotal to the changes that should take place in us, we need to be clear that this is not journey over destination. I mentioned this Wednesday night in Bible class. It sounds poetic, right? But I think it empties the road of its meaning. It's a sort of pop psychology slogan that sounds good to people, that sounds deep and meaningful, but is actually devoid of the true meaning that Christianity gives us. It's the stop to smell the roses of the aimless, right? The journey's all that matters, so enjoy it while you have it, right? That's what people do that have a destination in mind. And so as much as the road should shape us and the journey matters, it isn't journey over destination. It's journey because of destination. The destination is what informs the path that we travel, and the way that we travel it, and the way that we're shaped by the road that we're on. Because the destination is real, the journey matters, and the rest is coming. The transformation now is necessary to prepare us for the destination that we're facing. Because God is preparing a city with foundation. He is preparing a people who belong there, who show the very virtues and characteristics that He desires of the people who are there with Him. And so we don't walk aimlessly and hopelessly searching for something that we're unsure of. We walk purposefully, letting God remake us along the way. And the hymn prays, feed me, strengthen me, lead me, carry me. Not just until we die, but until we're made whole. Because the God who guides us through the barren land is the same God who promises, I will land you safe on Canaan's side. I will deliver you there. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier about salvation. And it's the language of Philippians that I think sharpens what we're saying. Because when Paul talks about salvation, he doesn't talk about it as something that merely waits for us at the end. He talks about it as something that's already underway, something that's already taking hold. Philippians 1 and verse 3, he says, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making my prayer with joy, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Notice Paul's confidence here. God's begun the good work. And the thing that we look forward to in salvation, the day of the Lord, the day of completion, that's already started. We've already begun to receive the salvation that is to come. That's what he's saying. The good work has begun. We can't just wait until someday that God changes us. He says the change has already begun. We're already being shaped. The good work of completion of the day of Jesus Christ has started. Salvation, in Paul's mind, is not simply a verdict stamped on the soul for later use. It's not something we wait around for. It's a work in progress. And a few verses later, he describes what that work looks like. In verse 9, it's my prayer that your love may abound more and more, with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. He's telling us what he wants us to be, what that good work looks like, what that character looks like, what the change is. It's more love, it's more knowledge, it's more discernment, it's more growth. But what's interesting to me about this is notice what he says, so that you may approve what is excellent and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ. Not so that on the day of Christ you will be made pure and blameless, but that when the day comes, you will already be pure and blameless in preparation for it. That's the salvation that we receive now, the way that we are changed and transformed now as we journey towards a destination. The path changes us and strengthens us. Salvation biblically is God healing what sin has damaged. It's God restoring what rebellion has distorted. It's God reshaping a people who are fit for the world he is preparing. And we are already being reshaped for this world. And so it isn't something we only achieve in heaven, it's something that we begin to achieve now, that we begin to embody now. We don't wait for heaven, we prepare for heaven. And that's why the journey language is so important. Because we are challenged and then we're changed. And the challenges and the changes are the things that help us achieve salvation, the transformation that's supposed to take place. Your life isn't a rest stop on the way to heaven, it's a pilgrimage to heaven. Heaven isn't the definition of salvation, it's the completion of salvation, which means the journey isn't filler time. The wilderness isn't wasted time. The tent life isn't a delay. It's the process by which we actually achieve the salvation we're searching for. And here's something big that I want to emphasize, something that's hard for me to learn, but I think is critical. The uncertainty that we face as we journey is not evidence of God's absence. The uncertainty is the process by which we're changed. The doubt, the bumps in the road. That doesn't mean God isn't there. That means God is shaping us, and he's teaching us, and he's helping us to be changed. And it should help us see Abraham differently when we think about it in those terms, because he wasn't just headed toward a promise. The promise was achieved as he was being formed for it. God was teaching him faith. And as much as it was incredible faith for him to leave Ur of the Chaldees, he had a lot of faith to learn along the way. His faithfulness was learned and grew throughout the Genesis narrative, all the way until he's on Mount Moriah with his son. And God says, now I know. God was prepping him for that moment, and it's all the mistakes and the difficulties along the way that changed Abraham into that Abraham. The one that knew that God could resurrect his son from the dead if he so desired, despite no one ever having been resurrected before that. There's no evidence that God could raise people from the dead or would do such a thing, but he believed it because of the journey that he walked, because of the way he was changed. God was loosening Abraham's grip on what he thought and defined as security. Because security is not wealth and it's not a big house. God was shaping a pilgrim heart that could desire a better country. to see security differently, and to confidently hold on to that. And I think it's an important and powerful lesson because it speaks to all of us. We want the security of a bank account and health insurance, but that's not really what we need most. Think about it this way. If salvation were only about where we would go when we die, then the journey would be even more frustrating, even more unnecessary. It would be even cruel, right? Because it's just the delay, the suffering delay before God redeems us. But if the journey is part of what we're achieving, part of the salvation that we're attaining now, not only does it make sense then, it becomes necessary. It's pivotal to us becoming the people that we need to be. And God's purpose is not merely to guide us to rest, but to help teach us how to live as people of rest. Not just to wait for something to happen, but to take hold of it and be changed now. And that's why Hebrews can say there is still a rest that remains in the future, and yet speak of entering it today. We can attain it and change and be transformed for it now as we wait for Christ to come. Both are true. We're headed to a destination, but this journey is what prepares us and shapes us for that destination. That's why Paul speaks with such confidence, despite his afflictions, despite his persecutions. Paul hasn't been to heaven. He hasn't entered the rest the way that we talk about going to heaven. He hasn't achieved the destination itself. And yet Paul is unbelievably confident and assured of the destination. Because the journey is what has prepared him. It's what shaped him. It's what allowed him to achieve salvation even before the coming of the Lord. Despite the fact he hasn't been there, he's confident because God is actively at work, shaping him into a redeemed believer. And he can look at his own life and see the changes that have taken place, who he has become, and that is the evidence of the salvation that he waits for. Which means when we sing, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land," we don't ask God to simply get us through life intact. We ask him to finish what he started, to complete the work that's begun in us. Feed me because I'm still being changed. Strengthen me because this road is shaping me. Lead me, not just to heaven, but into holiness. It's not take me there now. It's allow me to maintain the life that I need to be shaped into the person I need to be saved. Not journey over destination. Not destination without journey. Journey because of destination. Because the God who has promised the end has committed himself to the work that happens along the way. Because he who began a good work in us will bring it to completion in the day of Christ. And I find it incredibly helpful and comforting to know that the journey is the process by which we know and attain this salvation, that we are changed, that we are molded, that it's necessary. It's part of who we are trying to be and becoming. And it contextualizes and helps us to understand why our back hurts some days, or why we get headaches, why loved ones die, why sickness exists and hunger, why it's by the sweat of our brow that we have the fruit of our labor. Because those things are the things that change us and shape us into the saved people that we can be because of God. I think that's important to see that. And we always offer the invitation to those who have not been saved to start the journey, to begin the work, to allow God to begin the work in you to achieve this salvation, so that in the day of Christ, it'll be completed, you'll be prepared for it, blameless as he returns. But I think it's also important to recognize that along the way, just because the journey is supposed to shape us, and just because the journey is difficult, it doesn't mean that we don't doubt and we don't struggle. And that's why God gave us a community of people to uplift one another and pray for one another. And so if you need to be baptized, or if you need us to pray for you and encourage you, if you need us to do anything at all to encourage you along the way, let us know as we stand and sing our invitation song.